You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. Now, as you know, this is a podcast where we explore lots of stuff. But in this particular episode, I want to explore a story of strength, perseverance, and transformation. I'm your host, Gunter, and this is a 50-minute journey where we'll be diving into the remarkable story of Dominic Lynch. Living on the picturesque northern beaches of Sydney with his family, Dominic embodies the very spirit of an active outdoors lifestyle. From his commitment as a surf lifesaver to his adventures in surfboat rowing and mountain biking, he really truly epitomises what it means to be a genuine bloke's bloke. His professional journey in engineering and the construction industry has been equally dynamic, spanning across Australia and beyond. In December 2022, life threw Dominic a curveball with a life-changing cancer diagnosis. This episode isn't just about the struggle. It's about resilience, it's about hope, and the power of a constructive mindset. Despite the challenges, Dominic's story is one of facing vulnerabilities head-on and finding strength in the simple beauties of life, inspiring his peers and his community. So buckle up as we delve into Dominic's journey, where we discuss the intersection of health, mindset, and the human spirit. Let's learn how he continues to navigate this challenging phase of his life. So stay tuned. So welcome, Dom, to my podcast, Inspire Change with Gunter.
Thank you for having me.
So you're absolutely most welcome. So this is going to be easy. We're just going to do a nice conversation about your experiences and what you got out of it, because I think you've got a really fantastic story to tell. I know it's a challenging one, and people often see things like in a very negative light, but you've got a very different take on this, haven't you?
Yeah, I do. It's been a very challenging 12 months, which we'll obviously delve into in the course of the conversation, but there have been some real positives, both personally and from a broader community perspective that I've got out of it.
So one of the things I want to do is I'd like to get you to give me a bit of your background, and because I like to focus this thing on men, how you see an intersection between your background and the idea of masculinity and men's culture and so on, specifically in relationship to what you've gone through in the past, but what you're going through now as well.
Yeah, look, I think that if I were to describe myself, not just maybe 12 months ago, even going back a few years before that, I'd be the quintessential bloke.
Yeah. A bloke's bloke.
A bloke's bloke, absolutely. So, civil engineer by background, which means I've sort of gone into a career in the construction and engineering industry, quite comfortable on site and in those site office type environments.
Yeah.
I've been a rugby player at a reasonable level I played for about 20 odd years, and upon the end of my rugby career, it sort of went into surfboat rowing and the like. I still actively patrol on the beach as a surf lifesaver. Yep. My peer group are typically guys in their sort of 45 to 55-year-old. They're all of a similar a similar sort of demographic as well.
Yeah, so let me just give the listeners a bit of a picture. Dom is a big unit. So we're not talking about someone in their, 5 foots.
Yeah.
We're talking 6 foot plus and
Yeah.
pretty solid.
Yeah.
So, some people would describe you as the alpha male.
Yeah. And I think that has contributed also towards how I've been perceived as a guy throughout my work career and outside of that as well, is that I'm the big guy, I'm the guy that people can stand behind, I'm the guy that people can rely on to be there. I'm a problem solver. I think that engineer in me is there, and so it made me feel very strong, and I have been referred to as as an oak tree, in the past, and not just once. It's happened numerous times from different people, and it was probably a tag that I at the time felt quite proud of. On reflection, and we'll unpack this. It's something that I probably needed to be more cautious of than I anticipated.
Well, I guess, most of us as men who go into sort of professional and corporate careers aren't really sort of educated about the other side. I mean, I know engineers talk about the hard skills versus the soft skills, which soft skills including people skills and all that. But it's also about being self-aware, and how am I travelling, physically and mentally.
Yeah. And I was leading a very successful career. I was doing well, working for a big corporate organisation in that engineering and development space, and I was very proud of what I did. I'd been there just short of 10 years, and I thought everything was great. I was out cycling with a great friend of mine in the national parks around here, and we came to a fork in the road, literally a physical fork in the road. And my friend Brian, he said to me, "Which way do you want to go? Which way should we go today?" And I said, exasperated, "It doesn't matter, Brian." I said, "Either way is a big climb. Either way."
Yeah.
And he just said to me, he said, "Stop. We need to have a talk."
Yep.
And he said, "Put your bikes against the rail. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this, because I've noticed over the past 6 months how depressed you've become, how your energy levels and your zest for life, I suppose, is disappearing. And not just me. He was a great friend of the family too, so he obviously knows my wife, and he'd been speaking to her about it and was concerned. And she was concerned too. And so not only was that a physical fork in the road, it was actually a proverbial one too. I had to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I think what I'd realised at that point was that I had been so busy looking after other things, making sure that I was delivering projects on time and doing what the client needed, and spending the hours that needed to get the job done.
Yeah.
But it was to the detriment of me, to my family, to my well-being and to my health. And it needed someone else to make me see that. And I reflected on that, and I have done in the past 7 or 8 years. And the oak tree that I was proud of being tagged as, oak trees don't have flexibility. They don't have the ability to sway in the wind. And I realised that I was always the support for other people, yet I hadn't built that community that I could reach out to in a safe space to support me when I needed it.
Yeah.
And to this day, I thank my great mate Brian for doing that.
Yeah.
And I know that that was a big changing point in my life that I think has influenced how I'm travelling today.
It is interesting that, people, especially in business development and so on, we talk about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And certainly one of my experiences in life has been that some of the things that we call strengths in certain situations are in fact our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And the thing that we perceive as a weakness, in fact, could be a strength.
Yes, and I can certainly see that, and probably vice versa as well.
Yeah.
But I think the silver lining that came out of this is that, I mean, I quit that job within 6 weeks.
That quick.
That quick. I knew I had to change.
You're a good listener.
I knew I had to change, and I had someone more than one person I love dearly were talking to me, and obviously that wasn't the last conversation about that. We spoke about this with Brian, with my wife, and the like, and things had to change, and they did, and I made them change, and the beauty of, or the silver lining, the opportunity that came from that is that I now work. I've worked full time, obviously, for a number of years, growing an organisation with a friend of mine who's got very similar values to me, and we built a very successful company where we do place the employee welfare first and foremost. We do have very high integrity in the decisions we make, not just in terms of corporate, but in terms of the people.
Yep.
And from my side of things, that was heavily influenced by not wanting to see anyone else in that position that I was in, because maybe they didn't have the Brian there to support them.
Yeah, I think you were extraordinarily lucky. Yeah. Not just in having Brian there, but Brian having the courage to actually go, mate, you need to just stop for a moment, think. Yeah. Because a lot of times, one of the things that I find with working with lots of men is we're often reluctant. We see stuff with our mates, but we're often reluctant to sort of go, hang on a minute, that's, you're saying you're okay, but are you really?
Yeah. I've certainly noticed that over the last 12 months. In becoming much more self-aware of my own health and my own well-being. It's quite alarming what you do see when you become more observant to it. That said, on the other side of that is, perhaps when you haven't been exposed to it, you don't know what you're looking for, and you think everyone's okay. You think you're okay. I did.
Yep.
And it takes a little bit of trauma to sort of go, wow, okay. Yeah. And it's a brave conversation to have with friends, and it's one that requires a lot of trust.
Yep.
And particularly amongst guys.
Yep.
And it's something that certainly in my headspace is turned from a curiosity into a passion, in terms of wanting to use my experience to make, not necessarily fix any problems, because that's not the right way to approach it, but to at least make an individual aware of what the options are and what help is out there, and just be self-conscious of their body and their mind and how they're actually how well they are.
Yeah. In that original job prior to the one that you changed into, would you say there were a lot of guys who were in a similar situation as yourself?
I suspect there were.
Yeah,
I suspect there were. But like in many corporate environments, and I don't think it would just be guys either, be girls too. And when you're in an environment like that, you're putting up your game face, and I think you'd see the real human being if you saw those people out of work, but outside of the work environment. So
but not in the work environment.
Sadly, it's if you were to show that, not just with the organisation that I was working with, but particularly with the contractors and the guys that are down physically in the trenches digging. If they're showing a sign of weakness, then there's no one wants to do that, because they're suddenly then going, I'm replaceable.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a thing about, certainly when I started as a psychologist in the 80s, and I got interested in some of the sort of organisational dynamics and stuff like that, where, the emphasis of introducing women into the workplace would bring the women in who would then share the sort of more feminine aspects in a way. A friend of mine a little softened the workplace down. Well, my experience that wasn't the case at all, because the women were playing the same game as the men after a while.
Oh, and better. And better. I think the downside, what I've noticed now in an engineering environment is it isn't the number of women you've got in an organisation like the one I work for, which is engineering and project management and construction and like we would take many more women in that environment if we could, because they're fantastic and smart, really smart people. Yeah. The problem lies in the number that are coming through school and wanting to go to university to work in that environment. Yeah. And I think some of the women on they're first class. Yeah. They are absolutely first class, not just in terms of what they bring to a team, but what they what they bring to a professional environment too.
Yeah. I talk a lot about empathy and leadership and the benefits of actually a more humane form of leadership rather than the sort of traditional patriarchal paternalistic approach that often uses fear as a motivator. I think we've yet to see a real groundswell across the board. We see it in certain corporations. So, Dom, this fork in the road that happened, that was quite a while before you ran into the sort of cosmic 2x4.
The cosmic 2x4. Yeah, it was. So that all happened in 2015.
Yep.
And then at the very end of 2022, so I remember it very, very, very clearly. In fact, I'll go back a couple of months before that. I think it's important. Yep. As I said, fit, active sort of guy. I felt a little bit out of breath when I was exercising, and I thought, look, I need to go and see the doc about this. This isn't great. I can feel that I'm not quite right. So I went to see my GP, who I've known her for a number of years, and she's our family GP. She knows us as a family, which I cannot stress the importance of that. Yep. And she said, okay, well, let's go and you're 50. Go and have an ECG, have a stress test. We'll just check out the heart and see how it is. And it showed a little bit of atrial fibrillation, so a little bit of flutter in there, but nothing to be too concerned about. So then just the suggestion was go and have an angiogram. We'll just do the full suite and just make sure you're okay. Yep. Angiogram came back pristine, not a problem at all. And so I went back to see my GP to look at the results and look at the report we'd got from the cardiologist, and she said, this is great news for your heart, but I know you, and you don't come in here when you're not feeling well. Or sorry, when you're feeling well. There's something here, and I want to dig a little bit further. And I said to Dr. Sun, I said, let's go, let's keep looking. There was a bit of discussion around the impact of long COVID and what that might be. Yep. And we just weren't happy with settling with that and a bit of a watch on.
Yep.
And the reason we spoke about long COVID, she actually asked, she said, when you did get COVID, did you still keep working? And I went, yes, I did. And she said, well, you should really have just stopped and rest. But I can't change that now. This is where we are now. So, lesson learned. So she said, well, let's just have a chest X-ray. Just if you're in time. That was probably around, would have been early December, 2022. And then December the 16th, 2022, I remember it very, very clearly, when I received the call to say that I've got cancer and that it had spread into my lymph nodes in my chest, in my neck, and hence the breathing difficulty. So because it had spread outside of the primary, the source of the cancer, then it's a stage 4 diagnosis. So not only was it you've got cancer, it's you've got stage 4 cancer. Yeah. So to someone who is, my family has been touched with cancer. My My sister-in-law had passed away in 2017 with very aggressive rare cancer.
Yeah.
So not just me or my wife, my kids. That was our experience of a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. It was grim. It was, oh my goodness. You immediately go to worst case, but then our worst case was compounded because of a very close family member that had passed. And so obviously your brain goes into overdrive at that point. You're wanting to know all of the answers and the like. But in my case, the answers weren't particularly clear. They couldn't find a really definitive primary.
Yep.
There was a particular protein that was existent that they picked up in the biopsy, and it indicated quite strongly that the cancer I had was in the kidney. So they looked at the kidney and they did scans on the kidney, and saw the urologist, and he said, "Your kidneys are in pristine condition." And I was like, "That's great news, isn't it?" He said, "No." He said that protein, if it's not within the kidney, it's within the matter around the kidney. So the whilst it was still defined as a cancer of unknown origin, the likelihood was that it was a papillary renal cell carcinoma, which is a rare cancer. It is not treatable in Australia using traditional techniques. Doesn't respond to chemotherapy, and because it wasn't a really clear definitive diagnosis, I was unlikely to get accepted onto any clinical trials. Well, there weren't any in Australia. Could be in the States, in Europe, UK. I wasn't going to get onto them. So a week before Christmas, Merry Christmas, you've got stage 4 cancer, there's no treatment, and there's no clinical trials. Whack. It was a cosmic 4x2. And I remember sitting outside of the hospital at Macquarie Park and with my wife and just bawling. What do we do? What do we do? And the cancer community kicks in incredibly quickly. The team are coming together. The quality and the availability of the medical professionals, and I was just so grateful and so amazed that even at that time of year that the support was there for us. And I had one final test which was done just before Christmas, but I got the results shortly after, a couple of days after Christmas. It was a PET scan, which is kind of like a heat map of your body, and it shows up cancer activity. And to this day, I'm quite surprised that it's the last test that's done. But what it did, it showed up a small primary, and they're very hard to spot because they're quite gelatinous, they're quite soft and small in the lung. And this changed things altogether. So I'd been seeing a urologist because of the likelihood that it was a kidney cancer. They were like suddenly going, well, it's not us that this isn't our game anymore. I was then with a team at Northern Beaches Hospital who are fantastic, and they're still treating me now. Absolutely brilliant. But it meant that lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death in Australia. I think it's a 5-year survival rate of around about 20%, but that takes into consideration other stages as well. That's not stage 4. Stage 4 is obviously lower than that. But it meant that traditional treatment techniques were back on the table. Chemotherapy was back on the table. And when you get told you're going to get given a drug that kills cancer, I'm taking that, give it to me and give it to me hard. And I was speaking to my oncologist, and she said, we're going to give you a course of chemotherapy. And I'm like, I think I was crying with happiness, because for me and the type of person that I am, it meant that there was a fight to have, and I was back in it, and I had a chance. And on reflection over the past 12 months, that was a really, really powerful moment for me.
Really important. Because here was something that you could do, whereas before you sort of essentially rendered helpless.
I was rendered helpless, absolutely right. And not just me, but the medical
team,
team,
yeah.
everyone was rendered helpless. And it was a statistic.
Yep.
That was it. And, but things changed, and yeah.
One question probably that might be useful for us to sort of address is you talked about the cancer community kicking in.
Yeah.
Can you be a bit more specific? I mean, you've got your GP, you've got the oncologist, you've got who else?
Yeah. So my initial point of contact was my family GP.
Yep.
Straight away, there's a referral to the appropriate oncologist.
Yep.
And, because they will specialise in different areas, but supporting that oncologist, you've got the treatment team, and also the education team, and that's really important too. I was up at the within days the treatment program is set out.
Yeah.
You are then meeting with the educational nurse up at the hospital. She's explaining to my wife about what I'm likely to feel, what I'm going to experience, what are the impacts, what are the possible side effects. You've got the nursing team themselves, or the infusion teams up there who are just exceptional.
Yeah.
But also from the softer side of things, you've got the social support.
Yep.
There as well, in case the ability to seek support for if your family and you just need that well-being or that support through kids going into their HSC year at school. My goodness, my head was immediately with them. I'm going, I'm stuffed up. I've stuffed up their education now. How are they going to deal with all of this over the course of the next 12 months? And so all of those resources are there, and they're making themselves available. And as a patient, you're a sponge. You want to know this. You're going from Cancer 101 to PhD with the feel as though you are within a space of a couple of weeks. And I was absolutely blown away by the support, and to think that I'm one of many hundreds of thousands. And I'm so lucky to live in a country which has got a public health system that is world class.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if this was in the United States, how would that look, I mean, the UK has the NHS, which is under extraordinary pressure at the moment. We are fortunate to have what we've got here. And hopefully no one's going to play around with it.
I certainly hope not.
So this is obviously challenged not just your physical being, but also your social and psychological being. How would you define that in your case? What have been some of the big things that's come out of it on that level?
Yeah, we're very lucky, and I say we as a family, and that's how I need to look at this. Is we are very lucky to have a strong support group around us. I have, my brother lives 5 minutes away, and having him there, and through my experience, and this is where it reflects back 7 or 8 years when I had that fork in the road moment. Is that since that time, and then the person that I am, I built that close group of guys, and that we do talk, and we're very open, because and it's not just my experience. My experience was a catalyst for a group of people that we love spending time with each other, and we chat, and we open up, and there's trust, and that was really, really powerful. But also broader than that. I mentioned that I'm an active surf lifesaver, and ocean swimming, and the groups that I spend time with, we chose as a family to be very open with them. We knew at the time, we knew immediately that we would need that support. And we were also quite open about it in terms of using a bit of social media, and I don't mean that initially to promote myself or any sort of pity. It was, we've got a lot of family overseas. I grew up in the UK.
Yeah.
And it was important that we had a lot of people that loved us and wanted to to know what was going on. And so we used that as a medium too. And what became quite apparent quite quickly was that because we had shared our vulnerability with our community, that the level, and that we had trusted them, that the trust that was being reciprocated stepped up a level as well.
Yeah.
And the openness and the honesty and the consistency of the communication was really quite powerful, and the support that I got from, not necessarily, it didn't take a conversation all of the time. Sometimes you just bump into one of your friends and they just give you a look, or they just hold your shoulder or something like that, and you knew that they had your back.
Yeah.
And for me, I knew that support was there.
Yeah.
And that was really quite powerful. And I also knew that my wife, who was probably, well, it's obviously not the physical diagnosis. She had to deal with the what was happening with me. But many people would not want to initially talk to me about my diagnosis. They felt that they'd be burdening me, but that they would communicate through my wife, Julie. And we had to really watch that because she was struggling too, and with the support of the group that we had around us, that burden was shared, and that while she obviously carried most of it, the support for her was equally as powerful within the community as well, and that's helped us greatly. And we're quite open with our kids, as I mentioned. They were in their HSC year at the time of diagnosis, and so they've grown up with this community around them too, and so it's important that they felt supported and were able to reach out if they needed to as well.
So during this time of getting the diagnosis and treatment, were you still working? Are you still working now?
No is the answer to the first part of your question.
Yep.
I got, as I mentioned, diagnosed December. I really sort of found out the extent of it in between Christmas and New Year 2022, and immediately called the director of the business, a great friend of mine, and said, "Can we catch up for a chat?" Yeah. So Julie and I, and he and his wife, who also works in the business, we caught up for a conversation, and I said, "Look, this is what's happening. I've got to go into a very heavy course of chemotherapy. I need to step back almost as of immediately." Yep. And the nature of the relationship we had in the business we had formed, even as a senior person in that business, as I was general manager at the time, there was no question. Yep. Tom, you do what you need to do. Yep. We will support you. Yeah. And so from January through to May, I was completely not working at all. Yep. What I then, after the chemotherapy, and I was going on to an immunotherapy treatment, which wasn't as taxing on the body. Yep. I felt that I needed to, and I was up for, just doing a little bit of work. For two reasons, I think. One is the brain stimulation. Yep. And just wanting to sort of be connected and stay connected with what I'd spent a lot of my career doing. Yeah. And secondly, I had been an integral part of growing a business, and I wanted to see the fruits and see the people flourish and the business flourish and things like that. So I do about 10 hours a week, up to 10 hours a week. Yeah. For that connection. Yeah. And I find that really quite a powerful thing.
So you went, fortunately, into the chemo?
Fortunately, yes. I've never heard it described like that. But yes, I was middle of
I'll do
January.
these
Yeah,
ones.
yeah. Within 4 weeks of being diagnosed, I was sitting in an infusion chair in Northern Beaches,
Yeah.
getting with a 7-hour treatment.
Yeah. How did you manage that? How did you cope?
By trying to inform myself as best I could. I had instilled, now I do, and I will just jump in here. My treatment is very, very much still ongoing. I'm not cured, I'm not fixed. I don't know what next year will bring. But I built quite quickly a 100% faith in the medical team that had been pulled together for me.
Yep.
I had heard from a number of people that, if they were to be in my situation, the particular oncologist I had is the person that they would want treating them.
Yep.
She's a straight shooter, but she understands the humanity of it as well, and we love that. Julie and I love that. We see her every 3 weeks, have done for a year, and we know exactly where we stand.
Yep.
The treatment teams are all fantastic. We rock in, they know exactly what they're doing. The important thing about that is that I'm not questioning what they're doing.
Yeah.
Certainly not going onto Google and investigating whether they're giving me the best drugs or not. Which means that I needed to focus on mind and body and turning up in the right physical and mental shape.
Yep.
Physically, chemotherapy has its effects over a period, and that's why it's not a sustainable treatment.
Yep.
And it was exhausting. It was. I wouldn't wish chemotherapy on anybody.
No.
But as I was told, it kills cancer. So I was like, let's go. So physically, I still knew when I had to rest, and I knew when I needed to do a little bit of exercise and keep myself strong. The dosage they were giving me was pretty heavy because I am a relatively young, relatively fit, strong person.
Yeah.
So they could hit me hard with it, but I knew it was going to have its effect. So that's the physical side of it. The mental side of it was having belief in that this was working.
Yep.
And I think that having been kicked and being hit by the cosmic 2x4 in December, I backed myself that this was it was certainly better than the other option I'd been given.
Absolutely.
And so we ripped through that first 4 months of the treatment, and the results were promising, good. Which meant then that the treatment could revert to an immunotherapy treatment, which is deemed a bit more of a maintenance drug. It's a more sustainable treatment process. The physical effects are less. You grow your hair back reasonably quickly. So your social, your sort of the stigma around how you look improves as well. But that didn't bother me in the slightest. All my friends that I held dear to me, they knew what I was going through. They didn't care. So, but in terms of the mental space, that's the most powerful. And and I was able to, because I knew that the team were behind me. I knew that we had a great network around us.
Any other aspects to the treatment protocol? Like, we often hear in cancer about, chemo, radiation, the immune sort of approach.
Well, I mean, you obviously become more susceptible to other things.
Yeah.
Even now with more COVID being in the environment, I've still got to watch out for all of that. And, but particularly during the chemotherapy cycle, you're pretty vulnerable. You're weak. But it does seem to. I do have times when I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I think I've been under every sandwich press on the Northern Beaches. Whether it's a CT, whether it's MRIs, whether it's bone scans, whether it's brain scans. You've then got blood tests every 3 weeks and on a routine basis, and then if there's anything else going on, then you've got more of those. I have had a course of radiotherapy fairly recently, targeting a certain spot in my spine, which on top of everything else, it's exhausting, and so it is a challenge to to keep that physical and mental well-being there, and understand that taking time out to rest isn't being lazy or isn't being isn't sort of
superfluous,
weak or copping out or anything like that. It's actually part of the job you've got to do. So you have got to, and for me in particular, where I was a problem solver and I love to be busy and I wanted to be active and doing things, to actually step back and go, I'm just going to read a book, or I'm going to go to sleep, or I'm going to...
How hard was that, Dom? Because, I mean, I did a lot of work with guys who basically slip under the label of workaholic, They tack everything else on around that, So how difficult was that for you?
It certainly, there wasn't an aha moment at all. It was, and it's only now, 12 months down the line, that I look back and go, oh yeah, I think that's when I got the balance right.
Yeah.
And so it took me probably about 6 to 8 months to realise, and I do sort of compartmentalise my time, my week. It's probably the easiest way to explain it.
Yeah.
I do a little bit of work. We spoke about that because that is my connection. That's my intellectual stimulus. I then have explored my curiosity and subsequent passion in that mental health space, and as we're talking today, I also do some talks too with a couple of organisations. I do a little bit of work with Gotcha for Life and with Cancer Council. In talking to groups where I can share my living experience, and particularly in that male environment, and the fact that you can expose your vulnerabilities and it's not a bad thing. It's actually, I know in my case, it's actually made me stronger. And then the third part of my week is spending time with my wife, and she works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So that's when I do my other bits and pieces, and then we have our time together. And on the weekends, the kids are around, and so we and if any one of those elements fell away or I disregarded them, the balance would be completely thrown, and I know that it would affect how I feel. And, but it's probably only when I look back and go, oh, that balance actually works. The work, the family, the playtime, it sort of balances well, and it's good. And I think I found that by trial and error. Rather than someone telling me, and then I look back and go, that's it. That was when I got it about right. And I don't feel guilty about any one of those aspects.
Because having worked with a lot of guys with various medical conditions and so on, that thing of either pushing through and constantly being active, and even using exercise, or overusing exercise, and then maintaining a busyness in order to keep their head from thinking about the problem all the time. Sometimes you got to go, dude, you just got to stop.
Absolutely.
Don't turn up at the gym, right now. You just got to take a week off.
I had, it was an interesting experience when I started sharing with our community, and there was a very, very different reaction from the females and the males. Within the women, and within the surf club, or within the community, or within the swimming group, there was a all-encompassing whole of family. We love you, we support you, we're there for you approach. And it was wonderful, lovely. With the guys, equally as loving and supportive, and cared a lot about the family, but the reaction, the first thing they offered was, let me know when I can mow your lawn. Let me know when I can put the bins out, and I'll come and help you with that. Or if you need anything moving, just let me know. So, I've got a 6'4" son who's bigger and stronger than me, and I know I'm all right, and that's he can perfectly handle the bins.
Not what I need.
but I know where they were coming from. I know where they were coming from, but the difference in response was interesting. And then the second question that was invariably asked, and the first time I didn't think much of it, was the guys would lean in and draw me a bit closer. And quite interestingly, quite a number of times they'd hold me on the arm or something on the shoulder or something and go, how did you find out? And so the first time that was asked, and probably the second time, I told my story, and this is how I found out. And thankfully, I had a good GP.
Yeah.
And everything. But then when it came to the third, fourth, fifth, 10th, 15th time that the guys would lean in and ask me, how did I find out? Yeah, it was very, very evident that they weren't asking the question for me, they were asking it for them. And we'd start talking, and some of I'll call them excuses, because that's what they are, for why or where their current healthcare awareness were incredible. And I think the classic one for me was someone said, well, I donate blood once a year. Don't tell me if something's wrong. And I was just taken aback by that. And I said, no, they won't.
Yeah.
They won't do that. I said,
I've had that conversation.
Yeah, who's your GP? Well, my wife sees so and so, but I don't need to go. I said, well, you kind of do. You're same age as me now. You're 50 odd.
Yeah.
You know, have you done your bowel screening? Well, I think it's in home somewhere. And you get these barrage of little things. And you know what gave me quite a lot of hope is within a couple of weeks, I actually had a few of the wives approach me and go, "Gee, I'm glad you had that conversation because my husband's taken himself off and has had checkups." Yeah. I'm going, yes, that's awesome.
Oh, it's invaluable.
Yeah. So,
Yes, it's unfortunate that our socialisation can actually be our worst enemy. You know, this whole thing on being the provider and, progressing up the corporate or professional ladder to the utmost pinnacle, almost at our own cost, health cost, whether it's physical or mental, has really got to change.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Why does it take a traumatic event to make you realise that?
I mean, I in a sense, I'm lucky because of my profession, and I often wonder how I might have been had I not become essentially a health professional. Because in my family, on my mother's side in particular, everyone dies of a heart attack by the age of somewhere around 65. In fact, my uncle had his worst heart attack at 42, almost died, but they got him back, and then had a series of others. And again, didn't live past, I think, 68. So I was very aware of that when I started studying. And so by the time I was 35, I went, okay, let's get a baseline down. And even my doctor at the time sort of said, you sure? 35 is a bit young. I go, here's my history. And he goes, okay, I get it. And so pretty much every 5 years I do the same routine. Now in that case, I'm very much, let's be preventive. So I look at, my overall lifestyle and, and I try to encourage men as much as possible. But I think you'd have probably more influence than I would in that space.
I think I probably do now, although we occupy very different spaces. Mine would be a passive conversation with someone that we've got a relationship with. But just thinking when you were telling me that, you and I, we both live in a great part of the world. We both love the ocean. Yeah. We're active. You said you went at the age of 35 and you started having your checkups and you were conscious of your family history. In the past 12 months, I think I've spoken to probably 100 guys about if not more, about their how they look after themselves mentally and physically. None of them would do that or do that.
Yeah.
And so it's it's great what you're doing. How do we get it to be normalised?
Absolutely. How do we normalise this?
Yeah.
How do we get away from the sort of outlier?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm doing it, but, this should be standard. We should just basically go, okay, these points I think this is where engineering is probably really useful.
Straight lines and graphs.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't muck around with it. Run by the numbers. What do the numbers tell you?
Well, information is king.
Yeah,
information is king.
and we still resist that to some degree.
Yeah, there is a lot of resistance.
So Dom, in terms of this experience, and we're talking about your experience as a man, and my experience as a male. From your end, if we went, okay, take out points. What is it that you want most men who'll be listening to this to actually really think about?
I've got a couple of things here, and the easiest one and the simplest one we'll just talk about first. We've touched on it to quite an extent, so we don't need to dwell on it. But please, if you don't do anything else, be proactive about your health, your physical and mental health.
Yeah.
You know your body better than anyone else. You know when something's not right.
Yeah.
So please do something about it. There are incredible people out there that will help. The second thing, and this is probably a bit more of a conversation we haven't touched on, is that it could be perceived that, or could be described that I've opened up and become a lot more vulnerable over the course of the past 12 months, and I've exposed weaknesses, and I've exposed, I'm so open because I feel comfortable in doing that.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that I personally feel a far more rounded and stronger mentally human being than I did previously. And I feel as though I've got a far greater purpose and awareness of what my role is. And, to be honest, I don't know whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, hopefully much more than that. But in that time, I have the opportunity to use that.
Yeah.
Or use my experience to support those that are open to it as well. And I accept that not everyone will be, and not everyone's interested. But if it's one person at a time that you can support, and it's way more than one, as you know. There are plenty of people out there that are there that want to listen and want to be, learn. Then that's probably that second key takeout, is that being open and honest with yourself and your support group is not a weakness at all. In fact, it can make you so much stronger.
Yeah. Yes, denial's the killer.
Yes.
As psychologists, we do go through our careers with losing people. I've been fortunate, not too many. One in particular was someone who was diagnosed with bowel cancer, and then dropped conventional medicine to go a completely naturalistic, a sort of alternative approach, and she eventually died. Now I don't have any problem with alternatives in conjunction. I mean, it's a bit like if I break my shoulder, I'm going to go, firstly get it checked out by an orthopaedic guy, and then if it needs surgery, I'm going to have surgery. I don't think necessarily an alternative is going to help in that moment, although having experienced that, acupuncture really does do wonders for helping to, speed up the recovery and stuff. So they are complementary, but not, not going down a sort of completely alternative route.
So the information is critical. Regardless of which pathway you choose, the going and getting those scans, going and getting those blood tests done, is fundamental. You know what you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
So you touched on a point there about denial, and it's not so much denial, but it was another observation that I made, and it was relevant, is that I feel that there are three categories of how people deal with things, and in my instance, in my family's instance, we chose to be quite open. and I believe it's working for us. I believe that the openness and the mental strength is helping my treatment. And I'm also aware of some friends of mine that kept their. I mean, I didn't know about them. They're friends of mine. I've only since I got diagnosed that they shared that they went through a cancer journey.
Really?
But they chose to keep it to themselves, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. They share it with their wives and potentially their kids and maybe one or two people, but they kept it very, very close. The area that I see is that area of concern is where you've got people that want support, who need support, but they don't have that, and they don't know who to reach out to, or don't know what questions to ask, or don't know what assistance is available. And I think that's the challenging area that we need to
I think that touches on that whole area we spoke about before we started the podcast about, education, community education.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for my work, I couldn't tell you what happens once you get diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
It only just happened that, my partner went through it. So I knew what kicked in. But a lot of people wouldn't really have any idea other than seeing the doctor and the specialist, and that's it.
Yeah, I sadly we did have that family experience with it, and we knew we had to act quickly, and we knew we had to be decisive.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think before 2016, 17, when Anna got diagnosed, I don't think we knew anyone that. We were mid-40s and plenty of friends and things, but I don't think we really knew anyone that had gone through that cancer experience. Not in our immediate group anyway. So it does seem to take an event or to really open your eyes to it. I think it's getting better. I think that the conversations around cancer are more prevalent now.
I agree.
It's not seen as the secretive big C. It's cancer, and it affects so many people. It's indiscriminatory, and it's a shit of a disease. But conversations are being had, and you see all the time. You see progress within treatments, and not just the drugs that you can be taking, but also the mental and support.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great.
Available. So thankfully, that big C isn't just
it's shrinking a little.
It's shrinking, but the circle around it is getting bigger.
Yes,
The support
is
bigger.
Dom, I'm aware of the time. I want to thank you very much for sharing a very difficult but very courageous story. You certainly had a time of it, and you're making a lot of it. I really appreciate that.
No, I feel as though I've got a story to share, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I think that from where I was 12 months ago, where you hit rock bottom. I mentioned before, my kids were going into HSC. I was 4 months short of my 20th wedding anniversary, and throughout the year, by staying focused on the treatment and focusing on the mental health and the aspect of there and physical health, I ticked off the 20th wedding anniversary, and we celebrated beautifully. The kids have finished school and they've got into the universities, and they're able. That's the first step in fulfilling their dreams, and it's celebrating those little successes along the way. It's really important as well. So. I've enjoyed this conversation. I love sharing it, and
You suggested there's possibly another one. I'm going to hold you to that at a future point.
Absolutely.
So, Dom, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Gunter.
And this is me and Dom signing off.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.guntersvoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda at noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at noirtainment.com.